Thank you, Matt. That's the coolest introduction I think I've ever had, man. I'm gonna hire you as my hype man, friend. It's a little bit at odds with the label for this whole thing, right? You know, hey, here's a great, fantastic speaker for Marketing Hell Week, right? You know, but I, as Matt knows, I love working with startups. I'm really enjoying getting exposed to the whole vibe around here, and you know, hopefully I'll get to see you all a little bit more moving forward. But we're going to talk about paid media, paid search specifically, and I want to make sure that everyone's equipped to, as you move forward and you grow and you start to think about paid channels, you should appreciate that as smaller advertisers, the deck is stacked against you. And Google is really good at finding ways to take people's money. They're not so good at acting in your best interests. It's an important thing to know going in, because this is a highly complex system that they've created. They have done their best to make it appear simple, but there is a lot of depth and complexity to it. So I'm going to show you a number of ways that you can better protect yourselves as you move forward and start to launch campaigns. So I thought about alternate titles for the talk. One could be, you know, don't be evil, other things big companies shouldn't say. But I'm a little conflicted about being up here because I'm essentially talking trash about Google, and I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Google. We spend about $25 million a year of our clients' money with Google. They are probably the dominant ad platform, but you know, I think that they deserve to be called out for some things. So I'm going to do that and hope that I'm too small for them to pay attention and retaliate. So we'll see how this goes. You know, you can assume, you know, there are these debates, Google's good, Google's evil, and I think that kind of misses the point. The reality is Google is a big public company, and they're going to act accordingly, and they're going to maximize their revenue, and they're going to do what it takes to hit their short-term numbers, and you just have to know that going in. And so what that means, though, is that they are telling you as the advertiser, yeah, baby, you're the only one, right? But in reality, you know, they're really two-timing us with their shareholders, right? And we have to know that. And that's just how the world works. That's how it is. In Google's case, though, they apply some what I call evil usability in pursuit of this dual motivation that they have, trying to keep their advertisers and their shareholders happy at the same time. And so I want to show you some examples of that in ways that you can protect your interests, as I talked about. Taking pictures is going to get me in trouble here. So let's open an AdWords account. Let's pretend that you're going in for the first time as a small advertiser and opening your first account. And if this is remedial for some people, I apologize. But for me, I've been doing this for about 15 years, and I've seen incremental changes that sort of struck me as being wrong. But I looked at it with fresh eyes just in the last few weeks, their onboarding process, and it struck me how many changes have been layered on over time and how the deck really is stacked against people. And so I wanted to surface that for people. So what could go wrong with opening an AdWords account? It's not like your ad's going to show up in places it shouldn't, right? I mean, the potential for this kind of stuff, it absolutely happens online. I was doing an audit on HP's paid search campaign 10 years ago, and they were advertising in the term digital camera, right? It makes sense at the time. Digital cameras were sold back then, and HP was a player, but they had it on broad match, which means that Google could show it up for any related term that they want to. And I had the pleasure of telling people at HP that they had spent $50,000 broad matching to the term babe cam and variations on that. Not the best brand impression, right? Lots of much more onerous examples I could go into, but your ads can show up all over the place if you're not careful, and you can burn a ton of money doing stuff like this. So you want to start an AdWords campaign. The interface looks like this. It looks pretty simple. They do a nice job of doing that. Some things are defaulted, but clearly there are a few things you need to do before you can take the next step here, right? The things they have defaulted, though, you want to pay attention to, because their defaults can be a little bit insidious, right? So first off, they're opting you into US and Canada. You may not be selling in Canada, and you can chew up an easy 10% of your budget targeting ads to people that aren't relevant. They opt you into both the search network and the display network, and I know there was a presentation on the display network, but they opt you into both for one campaign, which is generally a no-no. You don't want the same campaign hitting both networks. You want to segment those out. You want separate campaigns for search versus display. So that's not in your best interest. And I love this one. I mean, it sounds so reasonable when you read it. But seriously, if you step back, I mean, if I came to you and said, look, I run an agency. What I want you to do is give me your credit card, and I'll figure out really how much to spend and exactly what to spend it on and what the price per service is going to be. We're cool, right? No, absolutely not, right? I mean, but somehow Google makes billions of dollars doing that. They get away with that. It kills me, right? And I worry, I fear for the people that look at that and go, yeah, okay, that sounds reasonable. But that's an example of what I think of as evil usability. That's not cool. And they're not making the other option, which is, no, I'd actually rather figure out how to spend my own damn money myself. They're not surfacing that right up front for you. So right out of the gate, if you're looking at this and you're fresh and you just had your coffee, you're probably getting a sense, oh, you know what, this isn't, I gotta be careful here. I could burn a lot of money. Let's say you want to go in, add some keywords. I put in my own site, which was kind of a kick for me to see what they recommend for agencies. But what do they do here? They give you a sense for the keyword volume, as if that's the most important thing, and it's not. Right? Relevance is the most important thing. It's in Google's interest to have you choose the highest volume keywords that are going to drive the most clicks. It's in your interest to choose the most relevant keywords that are going to be reflective of your target audience and how qualified they're going to be. So you really want to think through the keywords that you're adding to your campaign. Also, they're going to broad match you. I don't want to get too geeky on this, but there are different methods of targeting for keywords, right? You can do an exact match, which is only show me when someone searches on this exact word. You can do a phrase match, which is show my ad to someone who searches for any keywords that include this phrase. Or you can do broad match, which is pretty crazy and you should never do. And of course, that's what they default you to. I shouldn't say you should never do it. But if you have a limited budget and you're just starting off, you generally should not use broad match. But that's what they default you to. What that one is that term, any term that contains that term, any synonyms, any plurals, any misspellings, anything that Google deems is remotely relevant or related at all to that core keyword you put in. You've got to be careful with that one. So that's just, and we're still just in the initial interface here. This is if you actually click the little edit icon on the bid strategy that they defaulted you into, and I love their contextual help here. We recommend having AdWords automatically set your bids to start out. Don't you worry your pretty little head about how we're going to spend your money, right? Sure. No. The answer there is, the answer there is to actually change that default to I'll set my bids manually. But even look at that language, right? I'll set my bids manually. It sounds hard. Right? No, I don't have to do that manually. I want to go the automated route. Let Google spend the money for me. No. Set your bids manually. And you don't want Google spending your money for you, right? It doesn't make any sense, but they make it sound so reasonable. So let's say you get past that and you actually get in there and you get into their dashboard interface. Now you're presented with this. Holy crap. Well, what's Google telling me is most important here? The red. Yeah, red. And look at their terminology. Your ads aren't running. To resume serving ads, please verify your form of payment. Fix it. Not click here to add your credit card. Fix it. This shit's broken. You gotta fix it. We're not getting paid. This is important. I mean, that's the message, right? It cracks me up how they do that. But this starts to overwhelm. Everything up to this point looked pretty easy. This now is like, wow, I've got a lot of different things to look at, options to choose. Not totally sure where to go next, but say you figure it out. Say you hit, okay, well, what I want to do is go into campaigns. Well, then you're presented with this interface. And I counted there are over 25 different paths you can take from here. And at this point, you wouldn't know it, but you're inside an individual campaign. And you might have many campaigns. And how would you know that the one thing you should do immediately is click on settings, right? What does Google want you to do? Add more stuff so we can spend your money. What you want to do is go into that settings tab and change some of these other defaults and surface some additional settings that are in there. What does that look like? Well, now things start to get really ugly. It's all text. There isn't a great visual hierarchy here. It's not really intuitive as to what you should do next. You're kind of on your own, right? Again, in my mind, kind of evil usability. And these are just the standard options, because there's a whole bunch of additional advanced options too. So what you want to do is actually go into each one of these things and make sure that these settings are configured properly, because it, again, can drain your budget evenly. One of these, and this is under advanced settings, and it should not be. Most people would probably tell themselves, well, advanced stuff I don't need to worry about. You know, that's not too big a deal. I'm not an advanced user. This one, everyone should pay attention to. It's how your ads will be rotated. And again, what they default to is the top one, optimize for clicks. Show ads expected to provide more clicks. That's how Google makes money, is when people click, right? And look at their little help. Ideal setting for most advertisers. Okay. And then you've got other ad rotation options through here. If you're doing it right, you have at least 2 ads in any ad group. You're rotating those ads, and you're learning which one is working best. You don't want Google starting to auto-optimize those ads for you. You want to manage that. Again, in the same way that you want to manage how much you're spending on a per-click basis, you want to designate, no, I want my ads to rotate evenly. So you don't want that top default one. You do want the last one, the rotate indefinitely. Because the ad that's driving the most clicks isn't the ad that's driving the best ROI for you necessarily. And you should be paying attention to that and managing that yourself and learning from that, and not having Google do what's in their best interest. So that's an important one. You can lose a lot of money that way if you're not careful. Next one is the bid strategy. Again, you know, you want to set up, you don't want their default that lets them decide how much to spend. You want to manually set the bids for your clicks. They've got other options that sound good for conversion optimizer, but unless you're operating at scale, those probably aren't going to make sense for you. That can be a cool technique if you do get to the point where you've got a fair number of conversions. Google will optimize the bids and the campaigns to optimize to your conversion goal, but you've got to have a fair amount of volume for it to work. So I'll give them credit. They have enhanced that capability quite a bit. It's pretty good actually now, but you've got to be operating at sufficient volume for the system to learn so they can start to auto-optimize on that basis. So out of the gate, definitely makes sense to just manually set your bids. Cool? All right. Another fun one, mobile bid adjustments. I love this one. Google made this change, and like politicians, they named something according to its opposite. So they named it what it isn't. What they said was, we're changing all our campaigns to enhanced campaigns, by which they meant they were taking functionality away. So it used to be that you could have separate mobile campaigns from your desktop or tablet targeted campaigns. And what they did with enhanced campaigns is they took that ability away and they combined them all into one. So you have to hit all devices from within the same campaign. That's enhancing Google's revenue. That's what it's enhancing. Now, at the time though, their give on this to balance it was to say what we'll let people do is set a bid adjustment, that is, bid more or less for traffic from phone devices at least. Tablet behavior is largely similar to desktop, but for phone devices, people might want to bid more or less for that. And so we'll let people set a bid modifier for phone devices. And here's where the evil part comes in. Where do you click to set your bid modifier for phone devices? I think we can all agree that you click on the hyphen, right? You click on the hyphen in the middle of the dead space, in the middle of the freaking spreadsheet interface to set that. I really thought this was broken when I looked at it. I thought, oh, I've got to go back. I missed pulling the place where the edit control is so I can show people where to go for this. It took me forever to freaking find this thing. I've been doing this for 15 years. This is messed up. They know damn well what they're doing with this. They're hiding this functionality for people who don't know where to look for it. Now, when you click on that, what you get is this little overlay. And again, it's a bid modifier. Most people are going to bid less for mobile traffic because it's not worth as much to them. But what's the default? They default to increase, right? Now, you might have a more of a mobile targeted campaign. That might make sense for you. Most people want to bid less. And then you can put the modifier in. What's interesting, and they don't publicize this, is if you don't want to run on mobile at all, you could set a negative 100% bid modifier and not have your ads show up on mobile devices at all, and save all your budget for desktop and tablet if you want. Depends, what your product is, who you're targeting, as to whether that makes sense for you. But it is an option, and it's a best practice for a lot of companies. So something to think about there. Why am I harping on this? Well, because your ads by default are opted into all this stuff. If other people opt out of all that mobile inventory, and you haven't, Google will start running perhaps more of your ads on mobile and less on other devices, and it can soak up a ton of budget if you're not careful. So this I just pulled from one of our client campaigns, but it shows you, even with a minus 25% bid modifier, they're still spending 20% of their budget on phone devices. It's a big chunk of traffic, it's a big chunk of the budget. And you get a sense when you look at the CPC, see they're spending less there, 21 cents. The market is valuing those clicks less as well. So for this industry at least, those clicks on mobile devices, or on phones at least, are worth a lot less. And that should be a signal to you. If something's cheap in an auction-based environment like this with lots of bidders, it's probably cheap for a reason, and you need to be careful. And it can soak up a ton of budget. So make sure that you set that bid modifier according to what makes sense for you. They really hide this one, and it can chew up a ton of budget. All right. Another one to think about if you've got limited budget is in the ad network. Say you're just running on the search network, not the display network. They'll automatically opt you in to run not just on Google.com when people search, but on their partner network and other Google sites as well, Maps and so on. So you have to decide for yourself if that's something you want or not. The performance on the partner network is actually still pretty good now. It didn't used to be, but it's pretty good now. But not quite as good as just on the Google network. So if you've got really limited budget and you really want to stay targeted, you might want to just opt out of that partner network. You might want to just uncheck the partner network. And that can, depending on the industry, can save you a ton of volume as well, and let you focus your ads on those highest value Google properties out of the gate. Not something that's evident, most people wouldn't know it's an option, can actually be an important one. I pulled in a representative example from one of our campaigns. It's about 20% that they're spending on the partner network. So if you think about all these different things we've talked about already, 20%, 20%, 10%, and so on, you can see how your budget can get distributed and dispersed amongst a lot of different places that you wouldn't necessarily want it. And it runs counter to our mentality, which is that, especially if you've got a limited budget, and most people do, you want to buy the most valuable traffic first. You don't want to just throw everything against a wall and just accept whatever good stuff you get. You want to target your ads at, you know, the best qualified prospects for you. Location options. This is just a fun one. This is just an evil usability thing again. If you geo-target your ads, or actually, you know, even if you target it to a whole country, it's important to know this. And for those of you that have any sort of a geo-targeting, this is a really key one actually, because they'll default you, of course, to the one that's going to broaden their distribution. And based on, you know, their very advanced IP targeting, they're really good at geo-targeting ads. But they won't just hit people within your target environment. They'll hit people in searching for or who show interest in my targeted location, right? Which sounds kind of reasonable, maybe. I mean, if I'm moving from Chicago to California and I search for lawn care San Francisco from Chicago, obviously I'm a candidate, right? That makes sense. Where it can screw you, though, is I live in a small town in the foothills above Sacramento. I live in Auburn, right? Well, turns out there are a lot of Auburns in the United States. And there's Auburn Hills, Michigan, and Google can broad match, and I might be serving ads to the college, you know, Auburn, right? So you have to be careful with these settings. And I'd recommend that people not use the top one in general, because you're giving up control if you're doing geo-targeting, and that you go with only people in your targeted location, and or you can run a separate campaign for people who are outside your location but who are searching for it or who otherwise show interest in it. Who's doing any who's going to have more of a geographic targeting? So some fair number of people. Okay, so important thing for you to keep in mind. Cool.
How targeted can you get with that?
You can get really targeted, and they'll even let you draw a custom map. So you can kind of geofence, you know, a full geofence with that. It's pretty advanced, the targeting capability. So you can target. That's one example you can do. You can do it by zip code. You can do it by major metro. You can do it by state. It's pretty slick. Yeah. We had a client yesterday ask us if they could target people at a convention, you know, on site at a convention, and we're like, well, yeah, we could. I mean, it's going to be pretty tight, but it could be done. You know? All right. Location and options I talked about. Budget. This is an important one. And this one isn't too evil, really. It's just something to be aware about. Google lets you allocate budget on a daily basis, you know, and cap out on a daily basis. And if you say, I'm willing to spend $100 a day, you know, it's about $3,000 a month. The reality is, as they say here in their overlay, your daily spend can vary and may peak at 20% over the daily budget that you set. So if you say $100, you could spend 120 or be charged 120 in a given day. But over the course of a month, what they say is that they'll max out at 3,000, or the monthly equivalent of that. It's just something to know going in, because you might think, I'm spending $100 a day. You might see 120 or up to 120 some days. And that's in Google's interest. They want to max that available budget. If it's a weekend day and everyone's out partying, no one's searching online, you know, they want to take advantage of when they come back to work on Monday and search volume is back up again. Important thing to know. Not a huge deal if you're spending 50 or 100 bucks a day. It's a whole lot more if you're spending 10,000 or, God forbid, 100,000 a day. And all this leaves you feeling kind of dirty, and like there aren't any good decisions, right? This is actual bathroom in the airport up in Kelowna, Canada. You don't feel good about the choices you just made, and that worries me that a lot of people are uncertain now about how to move forward. And you have to set these settings for every campaign. And some of our clients have hundreds of campaigns. And if you're doing a good job setting a granular campaign structure, it can be hard to stay on top of all this stuff. It can be really kind of a pain in the ass, but it's important because it can bleed your budget dry if you don't. And Google adds new settings all the time. And what are they going to do when they add a new setting? They're going to default you to whatever setting they want to, usually the one that is going to make them the most money. Well, Any questions about any of that stuff? I mean, that's the most egregious stuff. This isn't a step-by-step how-to. It's more of this is kind of big things to avoid and protect yourself moving forward. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Make sure I do that. All right. The funny thing is that even very large advertisers get caught out on this stuff. We audit campaigns all the time and find large, sophisticated advertisers that aren't aware of a lot of this stuff. Oh, wow, we're showing ads to people in the countries where we aren't doing business? Yeah. We're spending 50% of our budget on mobile and we don't have a mobile optimized site or landing page? Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time. So it's a pretty common thing. So, to your point about getting the slides, yeah, I've got some general guidelines for people to follow. I just wanted to summarize and put it in summary form for you here. I hate reading slides at people, so I won't do that to you, but we'll make sure that the slides are available to everybody. And then if you have limited budget, there are some additional things you can do beyond the general best practice guidelines to really better target and take advantage of the limited dollars you have to, again, our philosophy, buy the most valuable traffic first, rather than just throwing it out there. Something that I didn't talk about is a couple of different forms of targeting that you can deploy on Google. One is remarketing. Remarketing, you may have heard on the display side, serving ads to people who have already visited your site, right? Those are the ads that follow you around after you visit a site online. I get it all the time because we're running these ads, and so as far as I'm concerned, my clients are the only ones that advertise on the internet because those are the only ads I see. I'm retargeted constantly by them, and it's my own damn fault. That's actually a really effective form of advertising. Much higher return than general display. For a lot of clients, a higher return than their search campaigns. So if you're starting small and wanting to pursue the highest ROI activities first, remarketing is a pretty strong one. You're serving ads to someone who has at least shown some intent and familiarity and awareness with your business, and giving them a pretty, consistent but gentle reminder that, hey, you're out there and here's an easy path back to see what you have going on. Yeah, man.
Is it possible to combine remarketing with lookalike?
Good question. It's possible to combine that. In practice, you probably wouldn't. You'd have separate campaigns for that. There's a chance you'd end up hitting the same people, but the net result would be the same. And in reality, you should do both, because that's the other form. That's the similar audience targeting that Google can enable for you as well. So remarketing, hitting people who have already seen your site. Similar audience is another name. You may have heard programmatic media buying. There are other names for it. But the idea there is that if you've got conversion tracking turned on and Google can see who's converting on your site, well, they can mine their big database and say, well, do you want us to serve ads to people who are like those, or have characteristics in common with those that have already shown a tendency to convert on your site? That's another form of targeting that it has really proven to work pretty well. I was a little bit negative on it initially, but it really has come together, and Google's technology is good for it. There are other ad networks that just specialize in that. Rocket Fuel is one, Quantcast is another, but if you're starting small, Google's a pretty good way to start with that. So if you really want to tighten up your targeting, you use remarketing, you use similar audience targeting, and you use exact match search targeting. Those are probably the most highly targeted forms of advertising and generally the highest return. Yeah. It's in the settings. Oh, the question was how do the IP exclusions work?
What's the use case?
Often people will exclude their own company so that their employees don't click on their own ads and cost them money. So in some cases, they might exclude their competitors, just to screw with them sometimes and make sure that they don't drain their budget either. But you also might carve out, so we've got a client, a bank, that does business in 24, has 24 branches in California, but outside major metro areas. It's kind of a weird thing. They're more of an agriculture-focused business bank. And so what we did is we said, well, okay, they're covering a majority of the geography in California, but instead of drawing a radius circle around each of those 24 locations and having to do all these different things, what we're going to do is target California and then exclude the major metros. We're going to carve those out, and that turned out to be a pretty effective way to do it. Yes, sir.
With the remarketing in similar ways, like, is that better campaign level? Like, is the granularity you get multiple products?
It is at the campaign level. So what you could do in that event is set up a campaign to employ that level of targeting, and probably the right way to do it would be to have a separate campaign for each product. Well, there are multiple ways to do it, but that would be the cleanest probably. Yeah. Other questions?
Is there any way to drill down if you're just wanting to focus on B2B?
If you're just wanting to focus on B2B, are there other tactics?
Get business versus general people that maybe aren't business.
I mean, we specialize in B2B, and so a lot of it comes down to really choosing your keywords wisely and your targeting type wisely. But the motion, the mechanisms are the same. Have a good offer, but just, you're speaking to more of a business context. It's going to be more of a considered purchase versus an impulse purchase. But people are still human beings. They're still wired the same, right? Even though the thought process and the selling motion might be a little bit different. So a lot of the principles and the targeting methods really are consistent. Yeah, get the right ad in front of the right person at the right time. Yeah. Anything else? I love the questions and the back and forth. Yes, sir.
Particularly a big sales one. As far as I know, it's based on your time zone, not based on the customer's time zone. Is that correct?
It's a setting that you set when you create the account, and you can edit that as to what time zone you're going to set for that, and then I didn't show you the ad scheduling options. You can target time of day.
Yeah, it's based on the advertiser's time zone, not based on the customer's time zone.
Correct.
So you couldn't advertise any business hours regardless of where the customer actually is, like if they're in India or US, Australia, UK.
You'd want to set different campaigns by geography and then change the ad scheduling accordingly. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? All right then. So that's the bad news, and that sucks. As I drink my Starbucks here. Just checking time. So that's the bad news. Now, you've got to have some level of familiarity and sophistication and a little bit of suspicion, quite honestly, when dealing with Google and the other ad platforms. They operate largely similar. The good news is that it's not an all Google world anymore. We've talked about some of these alternative forms of targeting, and let me give you an example. Just in the last 3 years, this is from one of our major, actually B2B clients. 3 years ago, 92% of their leads were coming from keyword targeted search. And today, that's dropped to 57%. We've had a 35-point drop in mix that is keyword targeted search. And what's come up and accounted for that? Social advertising, remarketing, similar audience, other forms of display have really come on strong. Yes, ma'am?
Social advertising Google Plus?
No. It's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So we've gone beyond just Google and just keyword targeted, And this is for B2B. I think this shift is even more dramatic if you're targeting a consumer audience. Good news, it's not just Google. They don't have really monopoly power in that way anymore. Bad news is you probably have to be advertising on multiple platforms in order to maximize your reach now. So it's a little bit harder from an advertiser perspective, but it keeps everyone a little more honest because there is actual competition in the marketplace out there. And there's a ton of data available from Google and the other ad platforms. The onus is on you to figure out how to use it, though. And I liken it to a complex system. And with any complex system, there are rules that can be bent and there are rules that can be broken, right? And if you're really smart about it, you can use that data to get more out of the system and work the system. But it requires new thinking and being a little bit of a data scientist. And given that I'm at an accelerator in San Francisco, I'm guessing there's a pretty high level of comfort with that concept. So there are ways that you can use Google's data and the intelligence that they provide to gain a competitive advantage. So let me show you how to do that. But first, let's acknowledge that Google's native reporting is awful, right? Seriously? A line chart? And if I add a second one, I can get two line charts? Great. So the solution then would be to roll your own reporting, right? And do you like that? Burritos? Burritos. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, we're rolling burritos, yeah. So say you pull all that data in, and how do you report out on it? And that's a pain point that almost every advertiser has, is figuring out how to make sense of all this data. And so what I've pulled in are some somewhat forward-looking ways of creating dashboards and visualizations to help you advertise smarter moving forward. And this is just to plant a seed for right now, but I just want to show you what's possible if you can get your hands on the underlying data and how you can manipulate that. So another one of our clients where we're showing multiple dimensions trended over time. And the importance there is that you can look at any one of these things, but you don't have the context of the whole thing, right? So you could look at and say, hey, we're doing great more recently. Our lead volume is way up. Well, yeah, but so is your spend, right? The good news is that the orange bubble there is still in range. That's our target cost per acquisition, right? So ROI is still in line. Lead volume is way up. And yeah, you know what? There is a long-term conversion increase trends too. This campaign's on target. We're doing really well. We're growing lead volume. We're maintaining ROI. Yes, spend is up, but again, ROI is in check. And we're still doing a good job with our landing page and conversion funnel, such that we're on an upward trend there. You're getting a lot of good intelligence from one visualization here. And that can be really, really valuable. Another dashboard example that's got a little more interactivity built into it. This is week over week performance for another client. But they want to break out and they want to say, well, this client gets a fair amount of search volume on their brand name, and they want to break their campaigns out that way. What's our brand versus non-brand? In this case, spend or cost. Well, now they get a sense for it. And again, it's week over week. Non-brand is driving a fair chunk of the volume. Okay, good, good. But how's it relating to our goals? If we have a $10 cost per transaction goal for brand, how are we doing relative to that? You say, okay, well, we did horrible that week, but we brought it back in line here. Likewise, if we have a $100 non-brand cost per transaction goal, how are we doing relative to that? And again, we're starting to bring it in line. Getting a lot of good intel from one visualization there. And if I want to see it just for Google or Bing, I can isolate that. If I want to isolate it down to a particular geography or combination of geographies, I can do that. Really powerful. And if I want to toggle to see what my breakdown is by leads or by traffic, I can get that too, all within one interface. That starts to get really interesting and start to think a little bit differently about campaigns. Another one that a lot of people don't spend as much time with is, what's my overall mix of text ads versus image ads? and across all platforms. And what do I want it to be? And what's the right mix for me? And this is again a B2B client, and look at how much of their lead volume has been driven by display over time. And we've started to weight it a little more towards text recently. But I talked to the campaign manager on this, and he said, the sweet spot's probably about 50-50 is what we should be aiming for this client. The reason text is down recently for them is because their creative team went nuts and they tested some display ads that tanked performance. And so we weighted the campaigns back to text. But this is a way of looking at the data most companies, even very large companies, never do. You can, the data's there, it's just harder to do, and you need to create a visualization like this to be able to see it. Yeah?
Are the lines on that one cost per
CPA, cost per acquisition. Yeah, sorry, the label isn't real big over there. CPA is on the right axis. You can also trend, your campaign themes over time. This is more helpful as kind of a sexy visualization for larger organizations to help explain long-term campaign performance trends and how some things we thought were driving all the volume for us early, we decided we should bid less on. So we're lower on network, we're lower on firewall year over year. But what we've done is we've changed the mix and we're weighting some things and fishing in some areas that we thought were too expensive before. We're buying traffic we thought we couldn't afford because we realized that these themes, data security and security report, although they were expensive initially, now that we've looked into it, we realized they were driving really quality traffic and had high close rates and high average order values. They're worth it. And so we've changed our spend mix accordingly to be able to bid on those more expensive terms. And those cheaper leads that we thought we would buy all day, turns out they were cheap for a reason. And we shouldn't have been spending as much on them as we did. So we've changed our strategy accordingly, and we've morphed our spend mix over time. This is just a way of visualizing that. More helpful, I think, in larger companies. Yeah. Cool visualization. Now talking about where you're getting your leads from across the globe, by month, trended over time. And with this one, I love that it shows, in the U.S., yeah, we're seeing some growth, but really almost all of our growth is coming from outside the U.S. And that, for this client, this really helped them get their heads around and think differently about their campaigns. And you can't get that same sense, certainly not as quickly, by looking at a spreadsheet. A visualization like this really drives it home for people. And let's face it, for a geek like me at least, it's kind of sexy. I think it's kind of cool, it's fun to look at. And then of course you can overlay it on an actual map. And this interface can get really interesting too, because you can put multiple dimensions on. I can show how much we're spending in text, but then I could use color perhaps to show my ROI by country. That I think could be interesting too. But in this case, what we're seeing is, gosh, there are a lot of countries we're targeting ads to. We're getting impressions, but we're not really spending anything. Should we tighten up our targeting? Are we at risk here? It can be a good sort of safety check for a lot of people. And then one that I love. This is a SaaS client of ours, where we pulled in some of their back-end data, and this is just for paid traffic. Now we're seeing how much revenue they're driving per plan type. So this is per pricing tier in their case. They have a solo offering, a basic offering, and a business offering. And you're seeing now how much of each of they're selling month over month from their paid search traffic. And where it gets kind of interesting is when you break down, again, that brand versus non-brand. And the interesting point that came out of this one was brand is driving most of the revenue, but non-brand is driving primarily business accounts for them, which have higher values, higher lifetime value. And that's really the ones that they want to pursue the most. So this sort of validated our overall approach. Like, okay, we're doing the right thing here, because non-brand is driving a lot of the solo, very lower value users, but I'm sorry, brand is driving solo, non-brand is driving a lot of the business accounts. That's what we would want. It starts to get really interesting, and again, you can toggle and select the plan type or the geography as well, and change the date range on it too. So these are more forward-looking, but this is the type of intelligence you can gain if you really know what you're doing and can pull the data into a good visualization tool. So I'm just trying to plant the seed for how you might want to think about how you look at your ad campaign data moving forward and as you scale. Just going to get beyond Excel, get beyond the native reporting that the tools provide, and start rolling your own a little bit. In terms of how we created these, we've got a logo. We pulled data from different sources, front-end campaigns, combined it, blended it with some back-end system information into a data aggregation service. This is my new SaaS startup, by the way. And then used Tableau software, our data visualization tool, to generate the visualizations that you saw in those reports. Yes, sir?
So it's kind of an aside. Do you feel that Bing ads are as worthwhile as Google AdWords? Like, I always envision people using Bing as like, kind of a Walmart shopper. That's fair, but and I, of course, it depends on the business. But if I'm doing Google AdWords in some terms of working, should I consider pulling up a Bing ad too?
Did it?
Early stage businesses with limited budgets.
Everyone heard the question? Are Bing ads as valuable as Google ads? Should you be running on Bing? Is the audience similar or not? And Matt had a good point too. Early stage companies with limited budgets. Gosh, multiple answers there. If you've got limited budget and time, you probably don't need to be running on Bing. And it breaks my heart to say that. But if you're looking to max out and you do have the time, it can add an extra 10 to 20% of volume for you. The demographic differences aren't as great as you would think. I would tend to think that the same way you would, but I've heard massively conflicting reports from agencies and advertisers about that, and we don't see a huge performance difference. What we do see is a little bit of a cost benefit to advertising on Bing, because so many people have decided it's not worth their time. So there's not as much competition for that inventory. But strangely, I don't see the huge demographic breakdown. In fact, in some cases, I've even heard the opposite. I heard someone say at a conference last week that Bing is great for old, rich, white men, because they leave IE default settings. I don't know why, but and so first off, I don't think any of that's true. But we don't see a huge performance difference. There's not a huge degradation in Bing traffic that we see. Good question. I'm seeing Facebook come on strong, even for B2B. Twitter, even for B2B, which really shocked me. I did not see that coming. But if you're smart about advertising on Twitter and hitting the right people, even for B2B, it's proven solid. And I think LinkedIn could be big in this space. They're not yet. It's really small right now, but they've got the data. They just bought an ad platform called Bizzo. I think they've got the potential to be a real contender in the advertising space. Again, primarily for B2B, but I'm keeping an eye on LinkedIn as well for what that's worth. Any other last questions? Sorry, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit more about Facebook and B2B? It just seems like it would be a tough fit.
Facebook and B2B. You've just got such rich targeting. You can target, because people have filled out their profiles, and generally you can get a sense for industry or job title in a lot of cases. The level of targeting is just so good, and that's why I'm a fan of LinkedIn as well. You've got much different targeting options and much of it is about targeting the individual as opposed to of a behavior in general. They've done a really nice job. I didn't expect it to come as quickly, to be as good as quickly as it's gotten in general. But even for B2B, it's niche. You're not going to spend a ton of budget there, but do you get that with Twitter? Yeah, same thing. It's more of a niche, but the ROI is there if you've got the time to invest. You got a question, sir?
Yeah, with B2C, one of the things we're trying to do is track attribution source of installation. With Twitter and Facebook, it's directly installed, and there's no visibility on when the install actually occurred. We find out later when it's described, but we tend to see that half the people download it, but don't actually start it up.
Yep.
So is that something where we have to go to like Google, so that Facebook and Twitter API in the app itself to track installations? Or is there another way to do that, like with a landing page configuration or something else?
So the question is about attribution and how you track a software install. It's a great question. A few of our clients do that, and they see similar install rates, usually hovering around 50%, which is really disappointing and frustrating. But what they do, and I don't know if you're doing this, but on install, they actually fire a beacon back to notify that yes, the install happened. So it sounds like you're already doing that because you know your install rate. Is your question how you associate that install to the originating lead source? Yeah, that's a tough one. You'd have to load it into the download, right? Are we doing that? Apple Store is a black box. Is that what you're talking about? An app download?
Yes.
Install? Oh yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about more of a desktop install. Yeah. The App Store is not going to let you do that. I've not seen a solution for that particular one. I'd be surprised if Mixpanel may not have published something on that.
I think there's a link or deep links where you basically transfer to a page being added as re-engagement or engagement information. There might be a way to tie into the app framework that we need to put something inside the app or something. You've seen that before.
I have not. I've not seen it. I feel like there's something there, but yeah, maybe we could touch base after. Let me think about it. Other questions? I think we're about on time. Cool. All right. So to recap, Google makes it easy to spend money. It's on you to make sure you spend wisely, and you really can use Google and the other ad platform data to gain a competitive advantage. Smart about it. So, see you at the bar. Oh, where do I got? There we go. My favorite photo from the wild. I love good signage and advertising. All right, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.